Okay, right off the bat, I'd like to apologize if I come across as like frustrated or tired in this video. I just spent 20 minutes and like 8 gigabytes of 4K footage trying to record this video the first time, and all of the audio sounded like this. So I'm a little frustrated that I have to do this whole thing again, but whatever, that's fine. I can talk about this movie for a while. So Longlegs has just recently come out, a movie that I hadn't heard of at all before it released, and is all of a sudden being marketed as the scariest film of the decade. I'm a pretty simple man. I hear scariest film of the decade, I will watch it. And so I'm here to give my thoughts. This is going to be a spoiler review. If you don't care about spoilers or don't think you're going to see this movie, go ahead and watch it. I would wholeheartly recommend going into this movie blind. I went into it having just seen the trailer, and I was very pleasantly surprised about the movie. So I would wholeheartedly recommend going to see it like blind. That's a really good way to go see it. But now we get to get into spoilers, which is really fun for me because on paper I really, really like everything that this movie is without all the plot twists. You got horror, you got the murder mystery, you got the following some law enforcement agency as they go on this hunt. You get a plot that feels pretty character driven for a horror movie. I sort of like everything about this movie before the movie even begins, so I'm going to try and not seem super biased and give a good review. I'm going to rephrase what I just said earlier in the video. I would very much recommend going to see this movie blind. That's the way that I did it. I had just seen the trailer, hadn't heard anything about it. I thought it had really, really good reviews, which to an extent it does, but it also has a lot of one-star reviews, which I'll talk about now. I feel like a lot of people gave this movie a one-star review, and I feel like a lot of people didn't like this movie because it isn't what it's presented to be. It is presented as a murder mystery horror movie that seems fairly grounded based on the trailer. And yeah, for maybe the first 5 minutes of the movie it is, but it slowly stirs further and further and further away until it's almost unrecognizable from what it started at. I feel like all the people that are trashing this movie around are the people that went into it really, really hoping that it was what it's presented as, and are the people that, you know, followed all the stuff right up until its release and were like super invested in it. And arguably, yeah, I can see why a fair few people were disappointed by that. If I went into a movie that I was really, really hoping was just a murder mystery, but then it ends up being about a doll maker worshipping Satan, like, yeah, I would be a little confused and a little upset too. But I feel like for the casual viewers, those who are just gonna like see this on Netflix in a couple years from now and click on it and be like, it doesn't seem that bad, I think a lot of people are going to like this movie. I think just from like a filmmaking standpoint, before I even dive into the plot or the characters or whatever, I think this movie is automatically presented very well. It's shot really well. I feel like this movie is sort of a template as to how a lot of horror movies should be shot. One thing I noticed while I was watching this movie is I feel like a good 85-ish probably percent of the shots in this movie had some sort of like hook for a horror audience. Like there's some kind of, you know, dark corner or a stairway that we can't see all the way up of, or a hallway that we can't see the end of, or like an open door, or like a dark window that we can't see what's beyond. Even in the scenes that weren't inherently scary, there was some sort of creepy atmosphere being built up by just the way that it was shot. There were so many like shots where you think you can see the entire room, or like really dimly lit scenes, which sometimes was a little annoying. But a lot of this movie takes place at night, and there's a lot of windows, and I feel like the like 3 times we see the like PNG of the yellow eyes was really, really well done. This is 100% a slow burner movie. I feel like a lot of horror movies that come out nowadays are just like bang, 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 and they get through all of their good parts in the first like 2 acts of the movie, and then comes that last third of the movie, and it's like, okay, now what? Now we've exhausted all of our cool ideas and cool tropes, and they either kill everyone at the end or just end it poorly. And so many horror movies struggle in that third act, and this one not as much. I feel like I was kind of expecting the movie to end right as Longlegs killed himself in the interrogation room, because my thought process behind that was, okay, they're gonna kill him now, they're gonna end the movie here with a couple questions like who's his accomplice, you know, what's happening, and then they're gonna come back a couple years later, make a sequel, just stretch the hell out of it just to make it answer those 1 or 2 questions. It's not going to be good. They're going to try and spin it off into a franchise, and that's kind of going to be the death of Longlegs right there. But right as I was starting to think that, boom, part 3, movie goes on for another like 25-30 minutes, and honestly doesn't dip in quality that much. Like, I feel like in the sense that a lot of horror movies choke in that third act, like I just talked about, this one doesn't really. Like, it holds its own kind of throughout. Granted, the story is sort of getting progressively weirder and weirder and more out there as the movie goes on, so it makes sense that that last 20 minutes would be almost unrecognizable from the movie you signed up for. I am really, really, really glad that they didn't extend it to that sequel and instead did try and sort of cap everything off in that last sort of 5-minute exposition dump. That's another thing I want to talk about. Hold on, I'm sorry. If you can't tell, I'm like improvising this whole video. When they do that thing for flashbacks, and it's like, I don't know how it looks like a Super 8 camera. I'll do it to the footage right now as you're watching it, where it looks like this, and that's their way of saying that it's in the past. That's just, I'm gonna applaud any movie that does anything sort of visual like that. They're always gonna get a plus in my books. But that was really cool. I don't see enough movies doing something like that. One thing I also don't see enough movies doing is just having flat out Satan be the main villain. I feel like so many horror movies, because you go into it with, okay, we have, so much lore about Satan and the devil and who this character is. We have to sort of play by that so many movies will avoid it, and they'll go to, like, albeit some of my favorite Hereditary is like my favorite horror movie, and they're kind of guilty of this, where they go to some like niche, I don't know, I'm not a demonologist, where they go to some like nicher demon that like fewer people have heard of, so that they can have more room to play around. And I'm kind of glad. I feel like we don't get enough of the devil in horror movies. I feel like he's such a staple of a figure. We should get more Satan in horror movies. One thing I could have potentially changed a little bit about the movie is the dynamic between the two main characters. I actually would have, if I were to make this movie, I would have made our protagonist be, I'm so sorry, I forget his name. I'm going to put his, picture up here. The, like, boss, the FBI boss. Because I feel like one of my small critiques about this was that Lee Harker, the character that we follow throughout the movie, just isn't that interesting. She's very quiet, very kept to herself, which fits with the overall tone of the movie. But it would be like if in Hereditary it was the brother that died and we focus the entire movie around the creepy daughter that doesn't say anything. Like, it works to an extent, but it's also not great as a protagonist standpoint. It doesn't give a whole lot of likability to the main character, and it arguably leaves a lot of the stakes feeling lower than they could have been if we actually care about the main character. I feel like they did quite a bit to make us like the main character. They make her mother sort of a nut job. They give her, like, these weird visions and stuff to see the future, which I think are cool. But I think overall, it's just weird to have a protagonist that's so out there. Maybe other people are on a different page about this. Maybe this is one of the facts that are loved about this movie. And in that case, please feel free to enlighten me on that, because this might just be a my opinion thing. But I feel like if I were to make this movie, I would have made this guy, again, forget his name, the main character, and have her role feels like much more of like an 11 in early Stranger Things type, where it's like she's not necessarily the main, like she's definitely important, but she's not necessarily the main character. It fits with like they work as a secondary character just because they're so out there. It's hard to focus a movie around them. You know what I mean? That's probably my biggest critique with this movie, honestly, and even then it's not a very big critique. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It wasn't at all what I was expecting. Like, I was not expecting a movie to end up like this, but boy, was I kind of, in a twisted way, glad that it ended up like this. This movie has really, really, really good jump scare bait, where, like, that one scene where she's, like, being tested by the FBI for, they think she's, like, a psychic or something because she got that one address right. And they're, like, showing her an image really quick, and it's like, okay, tell me what the first word is. And it's just like, I could have sworn I was on the edge of my seat the entire scene. Like, and they do that a couple times in the movie. And I feel like when they do attempt a jump scare, I didn't, like, noticeably or anything during the movie, but there were a few good, like, creepy moments when you see the mom approaching the car from, like, just from the outside, and she's just like this blurry figure that gets closer to the car. That was really creepy. I think every time the main character has, like, I call these like a demented Family Guy cutaway gag, where she, like, and then it cuts to something really creepy, like the Longlegs sitting in his basement making a doll for like 25 seconds, and then it cuts back to how things were happening. I think that was done really, really well. I think this movie does a lot to make it very off-putting. One example that I haven't seen anybody talk about, because I haven't heard anybody talk about this movie, is how the credits scrolled backwards. Like, they scrolled this way for some reason. I've never seen any movie do that, and it just helps make the viewer feel off-put, if you know what I mean. Like, shooting in a smaller aspect ratio, or what I mentioned earlier about how, like, every shot has something that you can't really fully see, or something like that. Just, this movie does a lot to really rub you the wrong way, I feel like, and that's what good horror movies should do. I applauded on that effort so much, because I see so few horror movies do this, and it's something I'm entirely guilty of myself. I'm not going to act like I'm some wizard at this. I'm entirely the same way that a lot of people do when they fail this, where they make their movie that's supposed to be like a scary scene set in the day, or like you can see everything that's going on. There were a lot of close-ups in this movie, or like, oh, like I mentioned before, you know, you can't see a lot in this movie. And that really helps build this incredibly strong, like, very fitting atmosphere that just, no matter what, it can be a very out there scene, and that has nothing necessarily inherently scary about it, but you still like are on the edge of your seat just because of the atmosphere and the sheer build up and the tension. And I would include the music in this, even though there's very little music. When the music hits, it really hits, and there's very little score. It's largely a silent movie, and I think that that works really, really well in this case. Overall, to sort of close out my review for the movie, I think it was directed and shot very, very well. I think the writing was tight. It made sense. It subverted my expectations a number of times. It tells a clear, condensed story. But I think the characters and the overall sort of relationships could have worked a little bit better. But overall, I had a very thorough time watching this movie. Usually, I might even just title this "Our Critics Write About Longlegs." Honestly, yeah, I kind of agree with the, I don't necessarily agree with the 7 out of 10s. I would rate this more 8, 8.5 out of 10. I think it was a really good movie, maybe even a 9. I enjoyed this movie quite a lot, and there's not much you can say to make me change my mind about it. I would wholeheartedly recommend going to see this movie without knowing much about it. I mean, I say this at the end of a video where I've done nothing but spoil the movie, but I'd recommend going to see it blind, and I'd recommend going to see this movie. Even if you know everything I've talked about, there's probably some big twist I missed at some point, because there's just so many in this movie. But you know what? That kind of ends all of my points that I wanted to talk about with this movie. So I'm going to stick around for a few minutes and talk about some, like, channel stuff. Just where I've been the last 9 months, what I'm doing. I realize I never said that on the YouTube channel before, even though I kind of talk about it a lot. If you're someone that's here just to talk about Longlegs, you're free to go. The video is basically over. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you thought about the video in the comments. But for those who are here because it's me, it's my channel. For those who don't really care about Longlegs and are just here because, I uploaded it and you know me or whatever, I would encourage you to stick around because I'm going to talk about some stuff. Okay, now just for a couple little channel updates, what's going on, why I've disappeared for 9 months. I realized I never really said this at all during my 9-month hiatus. I've been cooking a little bit, and actually I think it's best if I show you. I'm doing a movie too. I don't know if you can see my head in frame. This is a full-size poster of movie 2. I'll put up a picture of it, and like some PNGs. Wow, my computer went to sleep. Yeah, I'm doing a movie too, and it's honestly kind of almost done. Like, it's already wrapped. We wrapped in like April. I've never announced that on YouTube, which feels weird. It's just something that kind of crossed my mind. I've been posting on Instagram for 9 months about it. I've had this story highlight for a long time, and I'll post like pictures and behind the scenes stuff of where I'm at with the project ever since like early November, I think. So like right after my first movie came out. I'll have that sort of going here while you want it. This one, I can say when it comes out, you'll see why it took 9 months, basically a year. It's gonna come out in October. That's all I can say. Other than that, I have cooked with a movie 2. You'll get a trailer probably early September. Yeah, movie 2 is happening. It has been happening for a very long time. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I'm super glad it is how it is. Might show some like behind the scenes clips while I'm talking right now. It has been such a pleasure and such an honor to be able to work with so many people that are so talented. I've worked with enough people that I'm allowed to have a little billing at the bottom of my poster now.
Oh shoot, you have a popper. You have a bra?
Going from being in my room, making a movie all by myself, literally doing the slate myself, running into frame, doing the action, running out of frame and being done, like to now working with, I think I'm crediting like 20-something people on this. It is crazy. So I'm so grateful for all the opportunities I've had and stuff, and that's all I really wanted to say as my channel update. Movie 2 is happening. Can't wait for you guys to see it. So that being said, that's all I really wanted to say. For those that stuck around, thank you. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.